It was supposed to be a quiet weekend at my mountain cabin, until Karen showed up. Her son had wandered too close to my porch, and within minutes, her frantic scream shattered the calm. "Stay away from my kid," she yelled, clutching her phone. Moments later, I heard her whispering into it, calling 911. I didn't know it yet, but that call would trigger a chain of events involving the HOA, the sheriff's department, and a salute I'll never forget. Within minutes of Karen's 911 call, the distant wail of sirens echoed through the quiet mountain valley, shattering the peaceful evening. I stood on the cabin's wooden porch, completely stunned. I had done nothing wrong, yet I could already sense trouble brewing. When the first police SUV pulled up, its headlights cut through the trees like searchlights. Karen stood at the edge of the driveway, arms crossed tightly over her chest, lips curled in a smug little smile, as if she were certain justice was about to be served. "That's him," she yelled the moment the officer stepped out. "He's trespassing on private HOA property and scaring my child." I blinked in disbelief. "Ma'am, I own this cabin," I said calmly, holding out my property deed. But Karen wasn't interested in facts, she had already spun a narrative, and the officer was listening closely. Before I could explain further, the HOA president, Mr. Daniels, showed up, clipboard in one hand, walkie-talkie in the other, looking like he'd been waiting for this moment his entire life. "This individual has been causing repeated disturbances," he declared, flipping through his papers like he had a full case built against me. Something didn't feel right. Karen's exaggerated story, the HOA president's sudden appearance, and the speed at which the police arrived, it was all too coordinated, too convenient. Then, the second patrol car arrived. A tall officer stepped out slowly, adjusting his cap. His eyes locked on me, and his entire demeanor changed. Without hesitation, he snapped to attention, raised his hand, and gave me a sharp salute. The silence after that salute was deafening. Everyone froze, Karen, the HOA president, even the first officer. Karen's confident smirk slowly faded, replaced by confusion. "Major General, sir," the tall officer said firmly, lowering his hand but keeping a respectful distance. I nodded slowly, still processing what was happening. "Retired," I replied. Karen blinked in disbelief. "Major, what?" "No, no, no. He's lying," she shouted, her voice cracking. "He's dangerous. Arrest him." But the officer ignored her. He turned to his partner and said, "Stand down. This man's credentials check out." Then, to Karen, he added sharply, "Ma'am, calling 911 with false claims is a serious offense." Karen's face turned red, but she wasn't ready to give up. "You don't understand. He's been watching us, spying on my son. That's why I called." Before I could respond, the HOA president stepped forward, trying to regain control. "Officer, this is HOA jurisdiction. We have rules here, Anne." "Rules," the officer interrupted, "don't override state property rights." His voice was calm but carried the weight of authority. "This man owns this cabin, and as far as I can tell, he hasn't broken a single law." Karen started pacing, muttering under her breath, clearly realizing her plan was falling apart. The HOA president lowered his clipboard, his confidence evaporating. But I wasn't ready to let it go. I stepped forward and said quietly, "Why don't we talk about why you're really here, Karen?" Her eyes widened. She knew exactly what I was talking about, and the officer's suspicious glance told me he sensed there was a bigger story unfolding. The officer's gaze shifted between us, sensing there was more beneath the surface. Karen froze for a moment, then forced a nervous laugh. I don't know what he's talking about," she stammered, but her voice wavered. I took a slow breath and stepped closer. "Karen," I said calmly, "you've been trying to pressure me into selling this cabin for months. And when I refused, suddenly, I'm a threat to your son." The HOA president, Mr. Daniels, shifted uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. That was my confirmation, they were working together. The officer folded his arms, waiting. Is this true, ma'am? Karen's face tightened, and instead of answering, she lashed out. You don't understand. He's ruining our property values. This cabin shouldn't even exist here. I couldn't help but let out a sharp laugh. Property values? That's what this is about. At that moment, it all became clear. Karen and the HOA had been scheming to push me out. My cabin sat on land they wanted to develop, a new private clubhouse, according to the HOA's last proposal. When I refused to sell, they tried to paint me as dangerous. The tall officer's expression hardened. Ma'am, he said firmly, falsely reporting a crime, trespassing on private property, and attempting harassment are all serious offenses. Karen's composure cracked. I was just protecting my son, she muttered, almost to herself, but the damage was done. The HOA president tried to step in, mumbling something about miscommunication, but the officer cut him off sharply. I think it's time we documented this properly. At that moment, Karen realized her plan had backfired, badly. But she didn't know I had one more surprise waiting for her. The officer pulled out his notepad, ready to take statements, but before he could speak, his radio crackled with a call from dispatch. He glanced at me, then at Karen, and said into the mic, "We're going to need HOA legal on standby for this one." Karen looked terrified. Legal? For what? She shouted. The officer turned calmly toward her. For falsifying an emergency report, harassment, and attempting to interfere with private property rights. You're lucky this isn't a federal matter. At that moment, the HOA president's clipboard slipped from his hands, scattering papers across the gravel. He stammered something about misunderstandings, but the officer silenced him with a single glare. I stayed quiet, letting the silence hang heavy between us. Finally, the officer turned back to me. Major General, he said respectfully, you won't have to worry about further HOA interference. We'll be filing an official report. He handed me a card and added, call me if this happens again. Karen's jaw clenched, her plan in ruins. She muttered something about talking to her lawyer and stormed off, dragging her son behind her. The HOA president followed, avoiding my eyes completely. I stood on my porch as the patrol cars pulled away, the night finally returning to silence. But I knew this wasn't the end. Karen wasn't the type to give up easily, and in a community like ours, HOA drama never really dies, it just waits for its next victim. If you've ever faced an HOA nightmare, share your story in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to HOA Case Files, where we uncover the secrets, lies, and power plays hiding behind neighborhood fences.